Do you enjoy the harvest of Missouri through food, fuel, or fiber? Interested in strengthening your community or making a difference in the lives of others? You're in the right place. This is Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. Join us for thoughtful conversations around the intersections of farmer, rancher, and consumer interests. Grab a seat, press play, and join the conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Conservation in Focus webinar. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. We have a great webinar in store for all of you. I'll turn it over to our Director of Conservation, Agriculture, and Farm Operations, Clayton Light.
All right, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this webinar for a while, and to get a focus on conservation is always good. So anyways, glad everybody's able to join this webinar, and we can go ahead and get started today. So basically, a big part of this is we have our panelists, and we'll introduce them in a second, but we want to talk about partnerships, the power of partnerships, because in the conservation space, you know, a lot of these projects that we're working on are maybe leading edge type projects that maybe we couldn't do alone because we don't have the support or time or effort. But whenever we all combine and partner together for this, we can make some really good stuff happen. So just want to kind of go into some of that stuff today and highlight some of the projects we all been working on, and hopefully get some questions from you guys and show you guys the work we've been up to here lately. So with that, I think we'll start on some introductions for everybody, so everybody knows who everybody is. So I can kick that off. Like Samantha said, I'm Clayton Light. I'm the Director of Conservation, Agriculture, and Farm Operations here at Missouri Soybean. I've been on with them for just a little over a year and a half. And before that, I worked as a wildlife biologist for the Conservation Department. I spent most of my career working in natural community restoration and conservation work. With that, you know, my role is a partnership role as well. So a lot of our positions on this call all have partnerships as well. So I am an employee of Missouri Soybean, but I also get funding from the Missouri Department of Conservation for my role. So with that, I will kick it over to Brady to introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Brady Lichtenberg. I too got my start in conservation world with the Missouri Department of Conservation in 2012. I spent most of my time there at MDC and as a wildlife biologist as well, doing a lot of land management, wildlife habitat management. And then I came over to Mosoy on July 1st. So I've just been here a few weeks, kind of getting my feet wet, really learning about these projects that we're going to talk about today. And I'm the Conservation Programs Manager for Missouri Soybeans. That said, it's also a partnership program. It gets some grant funding from NRCS as well as MDC. So once again, without the partnerships, my job would be non-existent.
Perfect. Glad to have you on board, Brady. We'll go over to Kurt.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kurt Beckman, I'm the Director of Environmental Programs for Missouri Corn Growers Association and in partnership with Missouri Soybean. I've been here about 2 months. Prior to that, I worked with Department of Natural Resources, most recently as the Director of the Soil and Water Conservation Program, where I worked with a lot of different partners there. So I've been with corn for a couple months and look forward to extending those partners just as we're going to talk about today.
Perfect. Thanks, Kurt. Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Clayton. My name's Adam Jones, Conservation Specialist over at MFA Incorporated. Work out of kind of our home office, so I'm all over the state doing different things. Also in a partnership role with the Missouri Department of Conservation and NRCS, being able to provide conservation technical assistance to our customers. So super fun job. I got my start in conservation, worked about 13 years, lastly as a wildlife management biologist, similar to Clayton for the Missouri Department of Conservation. And now, you know, self-admitted soil health nerd and still a conservation guy. I also farm a little less than 400 acres up in Southeast Lewis County in my lack of spare time, as I like to usually tell everybody. So excited to be here, and thanks, Clayton.
All right, thanks, Adam. Greg?
Thanks, Clayton. Greg Collier with the Missouri Department of Conservation. I serve as the agriculture liaison. In that role, I have almost 2 years and I oversee 8 partnership positions, 4 of which are with the University of Missouri Extension, 2 with MFA, and 2 with Missouri Soy. So thanks for having me here today, Clayton.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. With that, I think that's our introductions. I think we'll just go ahead and start into the program now. Project that we've been working on is what we call the Missouri Carbon Pilot. This is a pilot that we launched in March of 2021. So shortly right after I started on Missouri Soybean, we kind of launched this. Like I said, we're focused on partnerships today, so kind of want to highlight this is a partnership project with Missouri Soybean, Missouri Corn, MFA, and ESMC, which stands for Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, which is a mouthful. So that's why today you'll hear us refer to them as ESMC. But they're a nonprofit carbon platform that specializes in ecosystem credits that can be sold in a private voluntary marketplace. Launched this back in 2021 with pretty much a goal of, we're getting a lot of questions from farmers about carbon markets, ecosystem credits. What in the world should they be doing? Is this a fad? Is this a reality? Is there going to be real money? You all know the questions that come with this. So basically, we wanted to get involved to learn about it, to figure this out, figure out some transparency, give that to our growers, and then be a resource that's unbiased to them as well. So that's kind of a big portion or part of why we're doing this. Also wanted to get some real good science behind it as well, and ESMC offered that. So very excited to work with them as well with this pilot. So we had a goal of 5,000 acres, got a lot of interest with that. So within a week, we had our goal of 5,000 acres met. We had 12 producers ended up into the pilot. So year 1, 2021 is already over and done. And those credits have been sold to General Mills on that. So excited to have that all done. And through that was a lot of learning, as well as some of the folks on this panel today can advance to that, of how much we learned in that time frame. With that, I might pass it over to Brady to talk about the biodiversity.
Launched a biodiversity credit pilot in October of 2021. That was with a partnership funding from Missouri Department of Conservation, and that was to offer incentive payments. The incentive payments basically serve the landowners that were cooperating a low risk opportunity for those corn and soybean farmers for us to kind of run our pilot with. Main goal here was to not only enhance native wildlife habitat and biodiversity, but we also needed to use it as an opportunity to learn if there's an opportunity in the private marketplace to fund biodiversity credits. Basically, if you think about it as, rather than a cost share program that would provide funding to put that habitat on the ground, it provides a back-end payment to reward farmers or landowners for the quality of their biodiversity and habitat that they created. With this, we're not looking to take acres out of production. The main thing we want to do here is use it to convert less productive acres and make them more profitable via the back-end payments, and obviously help the ecosystem while we're doing that. During this pilot, we had 6 producers that participated, and all have received their back-end payments through this program as of very recently. As far as what we look for in the future on this, we want to increase enrollment, obviously get more acres and more landowners involved. And we also need to work on standardizing a biodiversity credit criteria. We've got some of that kind of in place now. It's based on the overall size of the unit, as well as the number of native species that are present. But we need to kind of get down into the flowers a little bit more on that, and make sure that we're really accurately representing what ecosystem services these are providing and rewarding farmers based on that.
Yeah, so with those 2 pilots, some of the stuff that we're hoping to accomplish here is definitely, transparency. That's something I mentioned earlier, but with all the questions associated with carbon, we just want to be transparent. We just want everybody to understand what's going on, maybe behind the scenes on a sell and transaction of these credits, so people kind of understand where the money is going and how that all kind of works. So we are getting a lot of good information on that how it all works, and excited to share that stuff as well. And also a common theme that we heard with the carbon is early adopters. They're left out. An early adopter would be somebody who'd be already doing these practices. So with that, with this program, it'd be great to figure out a way to include them into this, maybe measure some of the positive benefits that they are doing already on their land as well. And that ties right into the biodiversity program, meaning that if you're already doing some pollinator habitat around edges of field, those acres are included in this. And that's something, we're wanting to figure it out. Are buyers interested in something that is enhanced, or does it have to be newly established? And that kind of ties into the early adopters with that. And we also just want to continue to be a great resource for Missouri farmers. So that's something, I got a lot of feedback during enrollment periods of this, is the trust. They really trust us. They trust MFA. They trust Quail Forever. They trust, MDC, these partners that we have on there. So they're willing to try out a pilot and maybe not be certain on a payment on that, but they're willing to try it and kind of get their feet wet and help us learn more. And also the price discovery, like I talked about, there's prices all over the board. Some of that is with incentive payments. Some of that is with the sale of carbon. Some of that is with the sale of water quality credits as well. So basically making sure our farmers are getting fair payments for what they're actually doing out there. So that's kind of what we wanted to accomplish with that, and pass it on over to Kurt to start talking about the edge of field monitoring project that he's been working on.
This podcast is brought to you by Missouri soybean farmers and their checkoff. The Missouri Soybean Merchandising Council is a farmer-run organization dedicated to improving the profitability of the Missouri soybean farmer through a combination of marketing, research, and commercialization programs. The checkoff is committed to empowering Missouri soybean farmers through innovation. The council is run by the farmer for the farmer, with 13 farmer leaders from across the Show Me State. To find out more, visit mosoy.org.
Well, thank you, Clayton and Brady, and thank you, Soybean Association, for inviting me here today. All right, so I'll briefly kind of give some background on an ag water quality monitoring program that both corn and soybean have been working on for the last couple of years. Actually, we're in our 5th year of this. So at the end of the calendar year, we're looking to put a lot of this data together and share with the farmers and individuals that may benefit from this. I'll give a little background on what we've been doing. So what this incurs is we have 8 sites across mostly north, central, and northeast Missouri, where we are setting up some evaluation of basically runoff from some of the conservation practices. The most common practices that we're looking at are waterways, and then cover crops, and then of course incorporating no-till into the cover crops. At each site we have a control site where there's no BMP, if you will, installed, and then we're looking at the runoff that comes from that on rain events, and then we're looking at where there is a waterway and maybe cover crops installed, what the effectiveness is of those programs. This program actually originated, also another partner was the Department of Natural Resources. Funding to initiate the program came from the 319 pass-through funds from EPA. Actually, a 319 program is in the Department of Natural Resources. So that really was a lot of the startup costs for this. So another example of many partnerships. So really the program is committed to collecting water quality data, and the beneficiaries from this are going to be landowners themselves. These sites are all located on farmers' properties. Some of them may be corn or soybean members. are folks that volunteered to let us set those out there. So we're putting those out there. We're also obviously sharing some of the data with like the Soil and Water Conservation Program at DNR, because those practices are what they cost share on. So if we can prove the effectiveness of those practices, then we know what nutrient loss reduction we're getting by installing those practices. And then when we stack those practices, if you will, if we put one practice on top of the other, then obviously the benefits are multiplied, and we get sometimes a 50 to 70% reduction in nitrogen or phosphorus coming off of those fields by putting those practices on the ground. We really would like to get this information out to landowners in a way that they can use it also to make better decisions on the farm. For instance, those that are have these, we share the data with the landowners that we have these sites on. They can see that in a particular rain event, if it was depending on the timing of their fertilizer application, that we can show them how much they may be losing. So it may encourage them to really focus on their application. The timing obviously is important, or maybe doing a split application, if you will. So they're really benefiting from that, and it's helping them make better decisions. Part of this, I think, will result in a way for conservationist programs, whether it be NRCS or MDC or DNR Soil and Water Program. It'll help them prescribe a practice that best fits the land and best gives them a bang for their buck. We want landowners to still initiate the voluntary conservation approach, but by giving them more tools in their toolbox and making those in-field decisions, I think they will realize that they're not only losing some of the fertilizer, but they're keeping the soil on their land, and we're reducing, especially phosphorus, which travels with soil, that we're reducing the runoff and we're reducing erosion. So probably the next, like I said, 6 months, we'll be summarizing some of this. We'll be in opportunities like this, be sharing some of this data. I know some of the cover crop data that we got on a big rain in the spring where there's no cover crop versus a cover crop. Some of the phosphorus reductions were anywhere from 40 to 50% of the runoff, which I think is pretty good numbers. Now, if you go and look at the science of this, which is what we really want to focus on, is the scientific approach. That's something we encourage. There are a lot of studies out there that are similar numbers. So cover crops was a big focus. We have some situations where there was some tile drainage and no versus cover crop in combination with that. So the numbers are looking pretty good, but we will be likely at the end of this 5 years in December, we're going to expand on that a little bit, maybe move some sites around and try some other practices and BMPs so that we can make those decisions and help those landowners make those decisions. A secondary benefit of this, of course, is that we are providing that cover in the wintertime. There's also some practices I think that Soil and Water and NRCS are doing that may be native species that would be drought resiliency, even flood resiliency. And of course, then there's the benefit for wildlife. So those are some secondary benefits. I think, the thing is that landowners just sometimes need better tools in their toolbox to make those decisions. I know coming from the Soil and Water Conservation Program, they're going to start looking at doing what we call targeted conservation, which means they can look at a small watershed and say, this is where we need to focus. And by providing some of this research to them, I think they can make those decisions. They're going to have some models that they're going to run that will do the similar thing. And then they can focus on where they need to put the conservation on the ground. And I think it'll be a benefit down the road.
Yeah, perfect, Kurt. And as you will see as we go through these projects, they all kind of tie together with conservation, obviously, but the information that Kurt is getting from this water quality, if we know what kind of carbon is being sequestered from the carbon pilot, and then we start to know how much nutrient runoff we're getting with these cover crops and stuff. I mean, it all kind of ties together, and you'll kind of see that with Adam's presentation here about some of the work MFA is working on, and we're all working on together too. It all ties together with all that stuff. So with that, I can pass it over to Adam.
Just to echo what Kurt said, that's some really awesome data that they're collecting. And just from a retailer perspective, as we're trying to do the best thing with the grower or for the grower, having them in mind on nutrient builds and application dates and timings, and under a no-till or a cover crop system, what's the best time to spread? When are we minimizing losses from a retailer? It's coming out of the back of our truck, right? So that's just some really, really cool data that they're collecting, and the local nature of that data is super helpful to us. And so just, I want to say attaboy on that before I start talking about what I'm actually supposed to. What I kind of wanted to go into was, we talk about placing some of the edge of field data and whatnot. We talk about placing some of the pollinator habitat on the landscape, right? So where do we place that? Are our current programs that we have available, through NRCS or FSA or some of the agencies that we're all very familiar with? Are those programs working, right, for what we want to do on the landscape to, put in field borders or buffers or waterways, et cetera, et cetera. So I think integrating some of the ag retail space in with that is pretty important. So, there's some things that when you look at edge of field practices, it's like, I can go down the list of infield management, infield agronomy that we can do on the landscape, but there are some things that we just can't fix, right? And then how do we turn that into just whole farm profitability, right? Because that's where we want to get. We want to integrate soil health practices. We want to do this edge of field work. We want to make the farm as a whole more conservation minded. But how do we turn all this into just whole farm profitability? And if we're making money on a field, we know we are. But are we making money on the whole field? And so just in a lot of the work that we've done, we really show that we're not. And I know personally on my farm that I'm not. And then if we want to remove some of those acres from production, how accurate can we get? What are some things that we can do to be extremely accurate? And I think these are cool pictures just because so many NRCS FSA programs in the past have been, okay, you want to do a field buffer, so we got to buffer the whole field, right? If I'm the grower on this field, I don't want to buffer that whole. I'm like probably the most conservation minded guy that you're going to run into on the street, but I don't want to buffer this whole field. I want to take out the spots where I'm not making money, and let's start there and work from there. And so how do we help our programs meet that goal? This is my favorite joke in the ag retail space. We can draw super highly accurate lines around problems you already know you had. And so sometimes we have the fix for those problems, and sometimes we don't, just like I mentioned in that first line there. But then, kind of where can we take this? Is there a grazing operation? Can we stockpile some cool season grass in some of those unprofitable areas and then be able to graze that in the off season along with the crop stubble? Or, what do we need to be doing? But the first thing that really pops to mind is just the initiation of that thought process that, hey, what parts of this field am I making money on? What parts am I losing money on? Why am I losing money? Is there an agronomic problem there that we can make an application or two and get solved? Or is it a lost cause? The terrace too close to the fence and those kind of things. And so just then knowing the solutions, right? We're blessed and we're cursed in Missouri that we have so many different programs, so many different opportunities to participate in cost share, CRP. We've got state cost share, just an awesome DNR state cost share program. We've got MDC cost share. The problem is that a lot of times this gets confusing for folks, and trying to find kind of a trusted individual that can guide you through that and say, right now, this program probably makes the most sense for your farm, or kind of, I know your operation a little bit, and this program makes the most sense. And so just, finding someone that kind of can sort through all that for you. And those folks are certainly out there too. And so just to go real quickly into the RCPP, RCPP is an opportunity for private companies utilizing private and state dollars in this case to bring more federal funding to Missouri. And I think that's super important because we all know that the feds are going to spend money out there on the landscape. They're going to spend money in the continental United States. And so what can we do utilizing the partnerships that Clayton was talking about to bring as much of that USDA funding to Missouri as we can? That's certainly something that we're interested in. We want our patrons to be able to take advantage of it. I know Clayton, Brady, and Kurt all in the same boat there. We want folks to be able to use that money in Missouri because we know there's projects out there. So we gathered up some private money from folks such as Bayer, plus utilizing some state money from the conservation department to match, and we're able to get a lot of good funding into the state. We just actually recently our first sign up for the RCPP deal has ended, but there's going to be opportunities there moving forward to be able to sign up and use some of that precision data to be able to place field borders and make sure we're doing it in the right spot that makes the most economic sense for the grower and the most practical sense for the field and those kind of things. So pretty excited about that. I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, perfect, Adam. Definitely always enjoy the work you guys are doing with, return on investment for farmers and profitability and highlighting all that type of work and how that works together with conservation, because I mean, that's how things are going to happen. At the end of the day, farmers need to make money. It's a business. They need to provide for their family and make their farm profitable. So if we can make it profitable and benefit conservation work, we're all about that. So that's perfect. I always like those slides with the yield and stuff. So appreciate that.
John isn't just a neighbor, he's a friend. So when he started acting differently and when he wasn't coming to the coffee shop every morning, I knew something was up. The stress of farming is real and affects everyone. So I spoke up and suggested John get help from the Agri-Stress Helpline for Missouri, where trained professionals who understand farming were ready to help. The call was free and confidential, and now he's back at Morning Coffee Talk. Don't wait. Make the call or text 833-897-2474 or find out more on the Missouri Department of Agriculture website.
With that being said, I definitely appreciate everybody's time today, from the panelists, everything we talked about. I think we have a few questions, so maybe we can go into those. And then if anybody has questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A again. So basically, we got a question here that says, do we think carbon markets are here to stay, or will they fizzle out? Without it being a fully public USDA or fully privatized, how will it sustain? So let's, I know I kind of talked about carbon, but I'll just go ahead and throw that one at Adam and have him answer that.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question, Clayton. So this is a common thing that we get, and I think Clayton would back me up on this. Is a common question we get as far as what's the longevity of this marketplace. I think some of that is yet to be determined. I think we have a clearer answer now, though, than what we did possibly a year ago. First off, I do want to clarify that currently in the private carbon space, there is little to no USDA involvement or government involvement. I know we kind of get that comment and question quite a bit, and to date, USDA really has not been involved at all in the private carbon marketplace. So these credits are being generated on privately funded and privately developed MRV platforms, or measurement, reporting, and verification platforms. So they're verified on those private platforms, and then they're sold to private companies. And there's really no government intervention in any of that process. Every